Hello and welcome to Hot Pursuit. Here joining me, former ambassador of the EU in Ankara and with Carnegie Europe now for a long time, Marc Pierini. Welcome, Marc.
Hello.
Good to have you. We are going to discuss the meeting yesterday having taken place in Ankara in Beştepe Palace, where Erdoğan received two EU presidents. The president of the European Council, Charles Michel, and the president of European Union Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. And there were lots of issues that were discussed. Apparently, the meeting took a long time, but most of the things now remembered and covered from the meeting was its initial pictures, its initial footage where Erdoğan invites these two presidents, but there's only one chair occupied by Charles Michel, where Ursula von der Leyen is left out, uttering the reaction and saying no more, and being seated 12 feet away at the sofa, face to face with Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu. And this, of course, was causing a lot of reactions. Pundits, etc., were really ironic about it, sarcastic about it, very critical about it. Let's begin with that, because you were one of the most prominent experts who, for days, maybe if not weeks, warned that there should be a lot of care and attention paid to this meeting, that it was a very sensitive time and it was there were high risks. What do you think of yesterday's meeting now? Let's start with the initial ceremony the last
well, let's start by something positive. You know, the European DNA is dialogue is always better than open conflict. When you think of the incident at sea in June, in August, two frigates collided, etc. So yeah, there is dialogue. That's about it. From a European point of view, to start with that, this meeting was preceded, including in the last seconds of the meeting, by a series of bad investments by Turkey, if you want. And I want to go through that so that you have a perfect image of how it was prepared. One, you have March 15, the president's op-ed in Bloomberg. Okay, that went relatively unnoticed, but here you have the head of state of an important NATO country saying to the other NATO countries, in particular to Europeans, follow my lead in Syria or else you'll see migrants. Yeah. First, bad investment. Second is that on March 19, you have this video conference with the same two persons, von der Leyen and Michel. Seems to be going well, but we only see a few seconds of footage. But immediately after, you have Turkey walking out of the Istanbul Convention, central bank governor being sacked, the HDP saga continuing, Gergerlioglu being arrested the same weekend. So,
Gergerlioglu meaning the HDP deputy, who is also a very staunch, active human rights defender.
A very difficult debate in the Foreign Affairs Council of March 22nd, I think, on that Monday, plus a very complicated debate in the Bundestag on Wednesday, the day before the European Council. So essentially what you've seen as a reaction to all this is a hardening of the position in Europe. Not that dialogue was going to be blocked, but really a rather negative turn, I would say, especially in Germany. And as you know, the German Chancellor has been the main proponent for months, if not years, of strong dialogue and concessions and so on to Turkey. Now, you have this storm in a teacup with admirals. It doesn't concern the EU very much. It's meant to hide the fact that one admiral not retired is part of a particular religious group, okay, and it all deflected towards Montreux and so on. Fine. Local tactics, okay. And then the protocol incident you mentioned, which is not exactly just protocol. It's not just a blunder. It's not only a lack of care by EU diplomats in preparing this. It is a deliberate gesture.
You tweeted, says same logic as leaving Istanbul Convention.
Absolutely.
The religious conservatives, and you said deliberate Turkey protocol, lack of EU precautions. And you ended, I said it before, you say, trying to please Turkey's president with an untimely visit was a risky tactics. It will happen again.
Yeah. So first of all, if you look at just the protocol aspect, remember the incident between the Turkish ambassador to Israel and the deputy foreign minister. They were seated like, 20 centimeters difference. Okay, it was a major upheaval in Turkish diplomatic circles. Well, the same happened yesterday. And that will, of course, leave traces, not just because it was a vexing moment for von der Leyen, but because precisely, as you recalled, it follows the move out of the Istanbul Convention. So it is one other of these sort of discrepancies between Turkey politics or Turkey's choices and what are European principles. So bad investment, I would say. Then on the visit itself.
But you said deliberate. How come do you draw that conclusion? Was it really deliberate from the Turkish side to stage such a mise en scène?
My assessment comes from.
Because you're an experienced diplomat, you should.
My assessment comes from 5 years of being the ambassador to Turkey, seeing countless visits by EU Commission President, commissioners, delegations from the European Parliament, attending other visits from member states and so on. And I've seen this type of incident a number of times. I'm not authorized to recall all these incidents in details, but I've seen that before. And I'm convinced we'll see it again. Because it's part of the style, it's part of domestic politics, obviously. But that's not the most important part. As vexing as it must have been for von der Leyen, it will be remembered as, well, trust was minimal before. Some people, not just me, but some people in European politics, in the Bundestag and elsewhere, said, don't go, too risky. Well, now you pay the price. Okay. As you've heard from the press conference, essentially what was said again was, well, look, this is an approach that we want to maintain. It's incremental, it's conditional, it's reversible. So basically, the EU went away, the EU visitors went away saying, well, we've discussed, we've made these points. We haven't seen an answer so far. We'll see that until June. What has changed on the European side is that, at least thanks to von der Leyen's statement at the end, they avoided a European disgrace from an institutional point of view. She said in very explicit terms that you don't normally use in a press conference like this, what they said in a room, and she used very precise terms. She said this was the beginning of a process, the momentum had to be sustained, human rights were not negotiable, they were absolute priority, Istanbul Convention was a wrong move, etc., etc. So she went into a series of very precise words, saying this is what we have said. And she said that because the debate in the European Parliament, in the Bundestag and elsewhere, is now much tougher than it was before. Remember where von der Leyen comes from. She comes from being a close associate to the Chancellor, from CDU, a party which is at risk of not having the next chancellor. You know, not just because of Turkey, of course, because of a lot of other things. You know, but it will stay as a political issue, not just the incident, but the fact that, you know, when you enter into such a visit, which was not obvious, you make a balance. You know, I've been in this business 35 years, as you know. Sure. In cabinets in Brussels, I've been ambassador 5 times. I've seen all of this before. You make a balance between the risk you take and the trust you have in the other side. Okay, the risk for Turkey, we know what they are. You know, Turkey's economy needs the EU. There are elections. You need visibility. But from the European side, the broad issue, if you want, is the legitimacy of whatever concessions you are going to make to Turkey. And this is under question in a lot of countries and in a lot of political parties.
Right. Before the meeting and after the meeting, now we are day after. Can we say that both presidents returned from Ankara empty-handed in terms of what they wanted to discuss? Of course, they expressed their concerns, as you said, about critical issues, human rights, rule of law, etc. But what's new in terms of, what's different in terms of concrete takeaways other than what said about human rights?
They came back with the same wait-and-see attitude as they came in with. Again, you know, conditional, incremental, reversible. Fine. Clearly, the EU is ready to work on, at least at the level of executive branch, no? On revamping the customs union in the interest of both sides. It's clearly ready to work on an addition to the facility for Syrian refugees in Turkey, and clearly available for high-level dialogue on whatever technical or political issues. Fine. The problem is that they haven't seen one single movement from Turkey so far, except withdrawing the frigates accompanying research ship. Okay, that is perhaps going to stay, but the fact that the trust is minimal is essentially triggered by the volatility of the Turkish political landscape ahead of elections or ahead of no elections. Who knows? So, you know, we have seen promises by Turkey before. We have seen U-turns by Turkey. European politicians are bound to be extremely careful. You now have less than 6 months ahead of the German legislative elections. Turkey can play these elections any way they want. In 1 year, you have the French presidential election followed by legislative elections. You know, these are big things in Europe, and everybody is sort of watching.
And positive momentum, maintaining the positive momentum. That was they were the words that were used by Ursula von der Leyen. In terms of issues being discussed, what are we left with? The customs union, the revision of or updating the customs union. Other than that, there doesn't seem to be any concrete points.
Yeah, you have 2 different levels. You have the preparatory work that the Commission is now carrying out, which is between the Commission and the Council, the mandate for revamping the customs union, and within the Commission, together with member states interested, how to put together a package for Syrian refugees in Turkey. Okay, these are this is the work going on the technical track. Okay, but taking decisions on these 2 tracks, and as you said, the others are relatively insignificant compared to this, will take gestures from Turkey in 2 different ways. One is maintain moderation, peace, and at sea, continue to talk to the Greeks and so on. The other is some form of movement on rule of law and human rights, which obviously is a proposition that the president of Turkey wouldn't want to entertain, in my view, at this stage at least. And, again, very rare that a visiting person of European Council level, so von der Leyen is head of state and government level, right? Which, by the way, explained the outrage at the SOFA issue. But never mind. She said that they mentioned human rights issues. She mentioned two names, Selahattin Demirtas and Osman Kavala. So movement is expected there because we're not in an autocracy in the European Union. Whatever, of course, you may argue Michel and von der Leyen are not elected. Yes, right. They are nominated by elected people, those in the European Council. Fine. But ultimately, if you want to move forward with a financial package or a mandate for trade negotiations, the two main aspects, you need the green light from the European Parliament and from national parliaments. You're never going to get this if rule of law continues to go down the drain in Turkey. Otherwise, these leaders, not talking of the two visitors, but the European Council as a whole, will look like idiots. You're sanctioning Russia, China, North Korea, whatever, South Sudan, Belarus, and you're saying nothing to Turkey? No, it doesn't work like this in politics.
I see. Two more questions before we finish. One is about, you being a senior, very experienced diplomat.
Somebody called me venerable. I didn't know whether that was a compliment or not. Anyway.
Two protocol issues on the different levels. Would it have been more appropriate if Charles Michel rose up and said, Mr. President, this is the seat for Ursula von der Leyen, President of the EU Commission, and just doing that gesture? Would it be helpful? That is the first part of the protocol issue. Second, you have seen many things during your tenure as ambassador in Ankara. Would it also be not, in terms of opposition vantage point, better if both presidents visited, for example, HDP headquarters in Ankara, or meet at least some non-NGO leaderships, human rights associations, etc.? Wouldn't that be appropriate?
Well, first of all, these visits are normally, or at least that's the way I was doing it, prepared with a lot of attention to details. Because, as you know, the substance of what you're going to discuss is known in advance anyway, because there is a dialogue every day and you know exactly what the issues are. But the devil is always in the details, as we have seen yesterday. So normally, the embassy of the visitors in that case, would take immense precautions to settle the logistics, if you want, the choreography. Whether this was done or not, I'm not privy to these details, but in any case, even if a promise was made to have 3 chairs and you end up with 2 chairs, you only discover when the door opens. Okay. Some people now, especially women in the business, are saying, shame on Michel, he should have left his seat to von der Leyen and go to the sofa himself. Well, these things are very difficult. Obviously, it was prepared that way, not by mistake, not by chance. It was prepared as a statement that Turkey does it its own way, and that is the logic we apply here. And this is the same reason why we walked out of the Istanbul Convention. So, in the end, the damage is not in terms of protocol. The damage is political. Now, on the rest of the visit, my understanding is that there was a meeting with UN agencies separately. Having a meeting with opposition parties represented in Parliament is standard in a visit, but you can argue that this was not an official visit, it was a working visit. Therefore, and it was a short visit, of course. Therefore, you couldn't do it that way. You can make an assessment or the other. I think what is bad from a European point of view, I'm speaking here as a European citizen, mindful of the democracy in Europe. And as you know, I'm not paid by anybody, and I don't work for any government or the commission or what.
Or independent.
And I consider that a visit like this leads the EU as an institution to lose a little bit of prestige, because was the visit really necessary? Were you really expecting a gesture to be announced in that meeting? No, of course not. I mean, Turkish politics are what they are, and you cannot expect something during a visit. It's just unthinkable. So you basically had this visit taking place as a goodwill gesture. Okay. It was, by the way, announced in the video conference of March 19, even before the European Council debate. And that, I think, is the only real conditionality that Europe has, is that Europe wants to deal with Turkey. To say it bluntly, does it have to vote Erdoğan to be able to deal with Turkey? That's the problem you have now. And that's not a debate between the EU and Turkey, it's a debate within the EU.
Final question. Reportedly, Charles Michel met Mr. Satterfield, the ambassador of the United States in Ankara, the night before the meeting yesterday. And also the day before, Antony Blinken, Secretary of State of the United States of America, announced that sanctions, a number of sanctions, I think 3 sanctions, targeted sanctions against major Turkish officials. And also there are reports now today coming out from various American newspapers that Joe Biden will recognize Armenian genocide by naming it, White House recognition. But back to, again, the meeting reported meeting between Michel and Satterfield and sanctions declaration. Do we read too much into, when mentioning this, kind of an interplay, US-European Union interplay in the overall choreography on how the Western system deals with Erdogan administration?
Well, 2 things here. One, the announcement on April 7 by the State Department is the follow-up of a decision taken by the previous administration in December. So it is just normal procedure. For the rest, what you're seeing, I wouldn't call it interplay or good cop, bad cop, or whatever. I would just call it return to normal between European diplomacy and US diplomacy. We're just out of 4 years of nightmarish relationship with the Trump administration, or with President Trump, if you want, because that resembles nothing we knew, whether it's in NATO or in US-EU trade, whatever, or Brexit, So we're just back to normal. These are 2 sets of Western leaders who are going back to a normal dialogue. That dialogue includes Russia, China, trade between them, Brexit in a way, and Turkey, of course, and NATO, obviously. So we do not see a lot coming out publicly, but there is a very intense exchange between the 2. And obviously, Turkey in Syria, Turkey in Libya, Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean energy issues, these are part of the dialogue. So I just see that as, one, going back to normal in a transatlantic way, if you want, and 2, of course, a loss of confidence in Turkey since the deployment of the S-400 missiles. Because look at what's happening now in Donbass. You clearly have the possibility of a more aggressive attitude of Russia against Ukraine. Assume for a minute, God forbidding, that you have a real conflict there, however limited. Do we count on Turkey or do we not? Do we know if Moscow is going to put pressure on Ankara or not? You know, these are real questions. This is not Fantasyland. These are real questions. Then Libya. Well, we are in the middle of a process to reconstruct the state, reconstruct security forces, apply what has been agreed at the UN in the Berlin Conference and so on. Turkey, Russia are facing each other in a way. What do we make of this in the new Libya? Okay, so lots of question marks, if you want. That's where we stand. And that is, of course, having a bearing on EU-Turkish relations.
I will not keep you any longer. Marc Pierini, former EU ambassador in Ankara and with Carnegie Europe. Thank you for this conversation, Marc.
Thank you for having me.